Welcome to my channel. Subscribe, listen and enjoy my stories every day. The sun barely crept through the blinds that Saturday morning, casting long shadows across the bedroom floor. I lay there, contemplating the quiet of an empty house, my wife, Laura, having left early for what she claimed was a yoga retreat weekend. The calm was a stark contrast to the usual hustle, a temporary silence that I would soon find unsettling. My morning routine was interrupted by a sharp ring at the door. It was Mike, my best friend since college, looking more disheveled than usual, his eyes clouded with urgency. "Hey, Alex, have you seen it?" he blurted out as soon as I opened the door. "Seen what?" I replied, puzzled by his anxious tone. "My family ring. I've lost it somewhere, man. It's been in my family for generations. I last remember having it here, last week when we had that game night," he explained, running his fingers through his hair in frustration. "We'll find it, Mike. Come in, let's start looking," I offered, clenching a sense of unease. Mike had never been careless with his possessions, especially something as invaluable as his family ring. We started our search in the living room, tracing our steps from the previous week. Nothing. The unease within me grew as we proceeded to check under the couch cushions, then the kitchen, and finally, my bedroom. The thought of invading my private space felt odd, but Mike's desperation left no room for hesitation. As I bent down to check under the bed, my hand brushed against something cold and metallic. A small, circular band, unmistakably Mike's family ring, lay there, partly covered by a dust bunny. Relief washed over Mike's face as I handed it to him, but my heart sank. "How did this get here?" I murmured, a sick feeling twisting in my gut. "Yeah, how?" Mike echoed, his relief quickly morphing into confusion. The silence that followed was heavy, loaded with unasked questions until Mike finally spoke. "I gotta go, Alex. Thanks for finding it." His voice was hollow, his usual warmth gone as he turned to leave. Left alone with my spiraling thoughts, I couldn't shake off the nagging doubt, the placement of the ring, Lara's convenient weekend getaway. The pieces were fitting together all too well, and I needed answers. Determined, I decided to confront the situation head-on. Canceling my plans, I drove to the so-called yoga retreat, only to find no sign of Lara. My calls went straight to voicemail. Frustrated and fueled by a growing suspicion, I drove back, my mind racing with every possible scenario. Arriving home, the scene before me confirmed my worst fears. There, through the slightly ajar bedroom door, lay Lara and Mike, wrapped in what was clearly not a post-yoga relaxation session. The betrayal sliced through me sharper than glass. In that moment, my heart didn't just break, it turned icy cold with resolve. "How could you?" My voice was calm but carried a venom that made them both jolt apart. Lara's apologies and Mike's stammers of excuses filled the room, but I was already far beyond listening. The plan for retribution began to crystallize in my mind. They had ruined the sanctity of my home, my trust, and my life. But I would have the last word in this tragic betrayal. As I walked away from the chaos behind me, the gears of revenge were already turning. They thought this was the end, but it was just the beginning. I would ensure that my unfaithful wife and the friend I once called a brother would regret their deceit more deeply than they could imagine. The air was thick with tension as I sat at the dining table, the morning light casting a stark contrast to the darkness swirling within me. Across from me, Lara's eyes, red and swollen from crying, searched mine for a hint of forgiveness, but there was none to be found. Mike had left hastily after the confrontation, leaving Lara to bear the brunt of the fallout alone. "Alex, please, let me explain," Lara pleaded, her voice trembling. "I think you've done enough," I replied coldly, my hands clenched tightly under the table. "How long, Lara? How long has this been going on right under my nose? It wasn't planned, I swear. It just happened," she stammered, unable to meet my gaze. "Just happened? You expect me to believe that?" My voice rose, the hurt manifesting as anger. And using our home? Our bed? What were you thinking? I don't know, Alex. It was a mistake. A terrible mistake, she sobbed, her words dissolving into a cascade of tears. I stood up abruptly, the chair scraping against the hardwood floor. Save your tears, Laura. You'll need them. Leaving her at the table, I retreated to my office, my mind racing with the myriad ways I could exact my revenge. The betrayal had not just broken my trust but had lit a fuse of anger that I could not extinguish. The first step was securing my finances. I spent the morning transferring funds and changing passwords. Anything that Laura could claim in a divorce needed to be locked down. As I clicked through the accounts, each transfer felt like a small victory, a reclaiming of my life piece by piece. Later that day, I met with a lawyer, a shrewd woman named Diane who came highly recommended for cases like mine. Make sure she gets nothing, I instructed Diane, who nodded, her expression grave. We'll do everything we can, Diane assured me, her voice firm. I suggest you compile evidence of the affair. It'll strengthen your case. Armed with a plan, I returned home to find Laura packing her things in a suitcase. Where do you think you're going? I asked, leaning against the doorway. I need some space to think. I'll stay at a hotel, she replied without looking at me. Good. Think about how you threw away our marriage for a fling with my best friend, I snapped. Laura paused, her shoulders slumping. I'm sorry, Alex. I really am. Sorry doesn't change what you did, I said, watching her as she zipped up her suitcase and headed towards the door. And it won't save you from the consequences. After she left, I sat alone in the silence of the house, the weight of the day's actions settling over me. My heart ached, not just for the betrayal, but for the love I still felt, buried under layers of anger and plans for retribution. That night, as I lay in bed, the reality of the empty space beside me felt like a cavern. Turning over, I noticed a photo on the nightstand, a happier memory of us smiling at a friend's wedding. In a swift motion fueled by a mix of sorrow and rage, I swept the frame onto the floor, shattering the glass. Sleep was elusive as my mind replayed the day's events. Revenge had begun to shape my actions, but the pain of betrayal, raw and unyielding, haunted me still. The coming days would not just test my resolve but would reveal the true cost of the vengeance I sought. The next few days unfolded with mechanical precision. I threw myself into work, meetings, and legal consultations, each step a calculated move in my broader strategy of retribution. The house felt cavernously empty without Laura, each room echoing memories of laughter and love now tainted with the stench of betrayal. One afternoon, as I sorted through some documents in my home office, the doorbell rang, a delivery. I signed for the package, puzzled by its unexpected weight. Inside, I found several of Lara's personal items that I hadn't noticed she'd left behind, including her jewelry box. A cruel smirk crossed my face as I pondered the irony of her losing these trinkets just as she had lost my trust. Later that week, a meeting with Diane brought new developments. I've managed to freeze her credit cards and hold our joint accounts. She won't be able to do much without encountering a wall, I informed her, a sense of grim satisfaction underpinning my words. Diane nodded, her expression unreadable. It's a strong move, Alex. Just make sure you're prepared for her reaction. People cornered financially can become unpredictable. I'm counting on it, I replied, feeling the coldness of my own words. As I drove back home, my phone buzzed incessantly. Ignoring it at first, I finally glanced to see multiple missed calls from Laura. I answered the next one, my tone icy. Alex, what's going on? I can't use any of the cards, and my landlord called about an unpaid rent notice. Lara's voice was a mix of confusion and rising panic. Consider it part of the consequences I mentioned, I said flatly. You should have thought about finances before you made your choices. Alex, please, this isn't you. We can talk this through. There's nothing left to discuss, Laura. I cut off the call, a part of me shivering at the starkness of my own voice. The following day, I decided it was time to deal another blow, one that would hit closer to her social standing. I crafted a detailed email to our mutual friends, outlining the bare facts of Lara's affair with Mike, careful to stick to the truth yet framing it in a way that highlighted my plight and her deceit. By the afternoon, responses filled with shock and support poured in. The court of public opinion was in session, and the verdict was overwhelmingly in my favor. That evening, as I sat reviewing the responses, another call from Lara came through. This time, her voice was broken, barely above a whisper. "Everyone knows, Alex. How could you do this to me? How could you?" I retorted, my voice devoid of the warmth it once held for her. "You made your bed, Lara. Now lie in it." After hanging up, I leaned back in my chair, my thoughts swirling. Each action, each move of revenge, seemed justified, yet a hollow ache had settled in my chest. Was I becoming the villain in my own story? As night fell, I poured myself a drink, the amber liquid mirroring the fiery sunset outside. The house was silent, the kind of silence that presses in on you from all sides. In that moment, I realized that revenge had indeed begun to transform me. The question remained whether I could live with the man I was becoming, or if, in my quest for retribution, I would lose more than just my wife. The days turned into weeks, each passing moment steeped in a cold, calculated silence between Lara and me. The legal battles dragged on, but my moves were preemptive and calculated, ensuring the scales of justice and revenge tilted in my favor. Yet, as each part of my plan fell into place, a lingering dissatisfaction gnawed at me. It wasn't enough that Lara was financially and socially cornered, something more definitive, more damning, was required to close this chapter of betrayal. One evening, I received an unexpected call from Mike. His voice was shaky, a stark contrast to his usual confident demeanor. "Alex, we need to talk. It's about everything that happened. I can't keep this inside anymore." His words sparked an idea, a final play in this twisted game. "All right, Mike. Meet me at the old warehouse on Dawson Street. Tomorrow at noon." As I hung up, a plan began to form, clear and cruel. I knew what needed to be done. The next day, under the harsh light of the noon sun, I waited inside the dimly lit warehouse. The place was deserted, filled with echoes of a past long gone, much like the remnants of my marriage. Mike entered, his footsteps echoing in the vast space. He looked around, his anxiety palpable. "Why here, Alex?" "Because what happens next shouldn't be overheard," I said, stepping out from the shadows. Mike swallowed hard, his gaze flickering to the exit before settling on me. I wanted to tell you that what happened with Lara, it wasn't just a mistake. We were planning to tell you, to end things respectfully." His confession, meant to be a bomb, acted as a spark to my pent-up rage. "Respectfully?" I laughed bitterly. "You call deceiving me, in my own house, respectful? Alex, I'm sorry." "Sorry won't cut it, Mike." My voice was ice-cold as I pulled out my phone. "But this might." I dialed and put the phone on speaker. A female voice answered, one unfamiliar to Mike but known all too well to me. "Is it done?" she asked. "Yes," I replied, keeping my eyes on Mike. He confessed. Confusion marred Mike's face as I ended the call. "What was that?" "Who?" "The private investigator I hired months ago. She's been gathering more than just evidence of infidelity, Mike. Embezzlement, fraud, turns out you've been busy." Mike's face paled. "No, that's not true. I didn't. But the evidence suggests otherwise." I cut him off. "And when the police find it conveniently placed in your office, along with a stash of money you embezzled, it'll be more than just marital infidelity you'll be answering for." Mike staggered back, his eyes wide with horror. "You can't do this. It's your word against mine. Except it won't be. The PI. She made sure everything was meticulously documented, traced back to you. And Lara? She's already agreed to testify, if it means lessening her own charges. Betrayal and panic twisted Mike's features. You set me up. Like you set me up for humiliation. Yes. My voice was void of emotion. Consider this my final move. Checkmate. As I turned to leave, Mike's protests faded into the background, drowned out by the sound of approaching sirens. Stepping into the daylight, the burden of vengeance felt heavier than the satisfaction it brought. Lara and Mike would face their consequences, but at what cost to my own soul? Driving away, I realized that this saga of betrayal and retribution was over, but the scars it left would mold a new beginning. One where trust might forever be just out of reach, a casualty of war in a game where there were no true winners, only survivors.